Last week, you had names like J.K. Dobbins and DeAndre Swift, CeeDee Lamb, even DJ Moore. They busted in fantasy football, and you probably lost your week because of them. Let's try to avoid that this week. In today's video, I've got more than 5 names that really scare me. I get bubble guts thinking about putting them into my lineup this week. I think they could lose you your week in week number 11. And if you have better options, you might want to look that way. My hit rate through 10 weeks is 70%. Feel pretty good about that. And last week, we actually hit on every single name. Let's try and do that again this week. First player, and this might cause some controversy, all right? And I understand it. I understand the reason you might be upset, but I'm not sure Jordan Love is the best start in week 11. Maybe you don't have a better option. You need to put him out there. I hear you. But let me just tell you why I'm a little bit concerned. Chicago, this is the worst matchup for your quarterback in fantasy football, point blank, period. If you remember last week, we actually talked about Drake May versus this defense. We did not want to play him. Drake May came out there. He had 12.7 fantasy points, just 1 touchdown, just 200 total yards. I mean, that feels like a bust to me. If you're getting 12 points from your fantasy quarterback, that's not helping you win your week, is it? The week before that, this defense played the Cardinals, and Kyler Murray was held to 4.7 fantasy points, 0 touchdowns. The same Kyler Murray who just absolutely dominated the New York Jets. This defense is legit. It's time to put some respect on their name. And here's my concern as well. Thinking about game script in this one, the Bears offense is putrid. And I know they just made a change at offensive coordinator, so maybe that lights the fire for them. But this Bears offense has been so bad. My concern is that the Packers could be more focused on rushing the ball in the second half than throwing the ball. They are currently 5.5-point favorites. It's a low over-under, 40.5 points. I mean, there's only one matchup under 40 points this week. This is the second lowest over-under of the week. I'm just not sure, guys. If that offense in Chicago doesn't improve and they're able to rush the ball against the Bears, what, does Jordan Love have a touchdown and 210 yards like what we saw with Drake May? Is that exciting to you? Do you see a scenario where there's a shootout in this game? I'm struggling to see it. So if you have some of these options instead, I'd rather play names like Brock Purdy. A lot of you guys might have these options on your bench. How about Russell Wilson? Russell Wilson is going to be on a lot of waiver wires out there. He is one of my favorite starts this week versus the Baltimore Ravens. That is the best matchup for your quarterback wide receiver duo. How about CJ Stroud? He'll get Nico Collins back. If you've got a CJ Stroud and a Jordan Love on your team, I'm going to lean CJ Stroud this week. How about brother Bo Nix? We have been trying to get y'all excited about Bo Nix. Nobody will get excited about Bo Nix. Why? The guy's a rookie. Look at how good he's been in fantasy football. I'd rather play him this week versus the Atlanta Falcons. That should be a high-scoring affair. All right, second name. I don't want to start. And, don't shoot the messenger. I guess you could if you want. All right, but then our whole mailing system would be, in shambles, so whatever. NOjee Harris versus the Ravens. I'm struggling to see a good NOjee Harris game. Honestly, I'm struggling. All right, so right now, the Ravens are the 11th worst matchup for running backs, but I think they're an even better defense than that number shows. Recently, Austin Eckler, when there was no Brian Robinson, it was one of his only bad games. He had 2.3 yards per carry and under 11 fantasy points. And remember, Austin Eckler's getting work in the air. NOjee Harris isn't. Nick Chubb, this is a great example. Nick Chubb had 52 total yards, 3.2 yards per clip, 5 fantasy points. That is a realistic outcome for NOjee Harris, especially with Jaylen Warren healthy, especially thinking about the game script this week. I mean, the Ravens are going to be able to put up points. You're going to have to keep pace with them. Are you going to put NOjee Harris in if you're down multiple points or multiple scores in the second half? I'm not sure you are. I think Jaylen Warren's the best play there. How about Javonte Williams? Another great example. 84 total yards, great, but 3.5 yards per carry and no touchdown, under 11 fantasy points. Here's my promise to you. If NOjee Harris doesn't score a touchdown, I promise you he will bust. And I don't really make these claims very often. So you can come back here, you can hate on me if you want, but I feel very confident that if there is no touchdown for NOjee Harris, he will bust. Touchdowns are impossible to predict from a 1 week to the next. I'd rather play names like Ramondre Stevenson this week. You're going to think I'm crazy. I'd rather start Nick Chubb versus Saints. It's a better matchup, same role, right? I'd rather start Tony Pollard this week. I'd rather start Kareem Hunt. It might be your last week to do so. All right, the third player. Oh, man. It doesn't feel good, guys. Jake Ferguson. Man, it would have been such a great year for Jake Ferguson if Dak Prescott could have stayed healthy. But versus the Texans, this is the 5th worst matchup for your tight end. And look, this isn't really even about the matchup. It's more about how dysfunctional this passing attack is in Dallas. Last week, guys, check this out. Shout out to Todd Archer. He says, more from ESPN research. The 49 passing yards the Cowboys had, which is what happened last week, guys. They had 49 passing yards, all right? That is their fewest in a game since their 2001 season opener against the Bucks. You can go on. Great name like Kyle Borgononi. I'm going to say that wrong, but I like Kyle a lot. Love the footballers. Since 2000, he says the lowest passing yardage games with 23 plus passing attempts are both Cowboys quarterbacks. And there is no Jameis Winston riding in on a white horse to save the day, right? I mean, this is going to be a bad offense for a while. They are tied for the lowest implied team point total on the week. They are only projected with 17 total points. It is just so tough to bet on Dallas Cowboys this week. I'd rather start Pat Freiermuth. I'd rather do that versus the Ravens. I'd rather start Taysom Hill with so many players banged up in that receiving core and that running back room. I'd rather start Cole Kmet versus the Packers. I'd rather start Hunter Henry or even Jonnu Smith. I mean, Jonnu Smith last week had the same first read target rate as Tyreek Hill. All right, the 4th name I just don't think is worth playing this week, and I love this player, but that's Rashad Bateman at the Steelers. I think a lot of people are starting to gain confidence in him, and I love that because I love the player. It was so fun to watch out of Minnesota when he came into the NFL draft, but it's not a good matchup. This is a top 10 worst matchup for your wide receiver. Remember, guys, we had both of the Jets wide receivers shut down. Garrett Wilson, 13 points. Devontae Adams was just 30 yards and 6 fantasy points. Malik Neighbors had under 15 fantasy points, and look, the reality is this defense is one of the better defenses in the NFL. They give up the 8th fewest total yards per game, and they give up the 2nd fewest offensive points per game at 16 per clip. But here's where I really don't want to start Rashad Bateman this week. I believe in narrative sometimes, and I think there is a lot of hate right now between Diontae Johnson and Mike Tomlin and this Pittsburgh Steelers organization. You know, our editor can throw up the screenshot here, but Mike Tomlin did not have anything really to say about Diontae Johnson. He kind of made him an afterthought, said there are more important pieces to think about. And in my opinion, this Ravens team, they have a lot of incentive to make Diontae Johnson happy, especially when it comes down to the playoffs and when it matters the most for this team. You get a guy right now, you show him some love against his former team, he's going to fight even harder for you. So there's not any analytics behind that, but I think we could see the production we normally see from Rashad Bateman go to Diontae Johnson because there's a lot of incentive for him to have a good game. There's just a lot of hate between these two guys. I'd rather start names like Jerry Jeudy this week or Pop Douglas or Quentin Johnston, Ricky Pearsall, or even Roma Dunze with the change in offensive coordinator there. But, you know, you do you. Last name that I'm really concerned about before we get into some honorable mentions is Rico Dowdle. And Rico Dowdle was on this video last week, and I'm going to continue to tell you not to play him. I just don't feel good about it, guys, especially not in a bad matchup versus the Texans. The Texans are the 3rd worst matchup for your running back. I mean, Johnny Taylor had 3 yards per carry against this team. DeAndre Swift had 1.3 yards per carry. David Montgomery had 2.7 yards per carry. It has not been good recently at all against this defense. And the Cowboys, like we mentioned, huge underdogs. Unlikely to be able to run the ball in the second half with Rico Dowdle. Unlikely to be able to sustain long drives. They're 7.5-point dogs in this one. And like we said with Jake Ferguson, tied for the lowest implied team point total on the week. I just don't think you're going to like the returns on this investment. I'd rather start Alexander Madison. That might sound insane. I prefer his matchup. I prefer his offense. I'd rather start Jaylen Warren. You know, we talked about NOjee Harris. I think Jaylen Warren could have a better game as the pass-catching guy there. I'd rather start Ramondre Stevenson, Nick Chubb, like we talked about. So those are some names that I would rather start over Rico Dowdle. I get it if you don't have a better name, but some of you might have better options. All right, and here's a list of other matchups that I'm not really going to, you know, plant my flag on, but I don't love these matchups either. For example, Kirk Cousins at the Broncos. I think they might opt to attack them on the ground. Sam Darnold at the Titans. Not a good matchup for him. He struggled recently. Romeo Doubs at the Bears. Same reason as Jordan Love. It's a tough matchup for wide receivers and quarterbacks. And then any Jags running back against the Lions. I mean, Joe Mixon was just completely shut down last week against this defense. They're still good against the run. So those are players I don't want to start. Do me a favor, hit that like button to show some love. Subscribe if you like the content. Disclaimer, as I always have to say, I can't predict the future. Anything can happen. Make decisions for yourself, all right? Because ultimately, I don't have a crystal ball. I'm bringing you the rationale. You make the decisions for yourself in your lineup. And if you guys are having a difficult time with your start-sit decisions this week, check out the pinned comment down below. It's a link to our website where you can ask me a question at any time. And if you don't have a free account yet on the Flock Fantasy site, it's an incredible resource to you. You can get a bunch of things when you use our promo code LAND, L-A-N-D, at sign up. You'll get the expert consensus rankings, the My Team Analyzer, and of course the trade calculator when you use our promo code LAND. I appreciate y'all watching this video. Drop a like, subscribe if you like the content, and I'll see you soon. Let's make some right calls this week, all right? Hold up. Now that those idiots are done talking, who needs some rankings?
Hell yeah, I need some rankings.
Then use promo code LAND, L-A-N-D, for 30% off any membership at flockfantasy.com.
Oh.